but I will go into several points, perhaps not necessarily in any order of priority, but I wanted to throw the points out there just in case somebody wants to bite into any of them and we go forward. So the three areas I'd like to look at, the first area I'd like to look at is that term national interest. People like to make, the politicians like to tell us it is being done in national interest. In fact, one minister went on to when questioned about a particular major transportation investment, about its justification, went on to add, it's obvious, which is my second point. Limited data, second point. And the third is how do we approach implementation of what we have decided on in a time of economic constraints. So that's the three areas. So let me jump right into it. National interest is decided in cabinet, but I am suggesting that it should not be decided without the appropriate tools and information. And the supporting information should come in the form of collaboration between agencies of government, developers, and other major landowners, because we're talking land use planning. Before the information, the decision is actually taken. And the decisions need to be analyzed from the perspective of perhaps multi-criteria analysis, multi-objective, putting together this from the second point, which is the limited data. For the last 25 years or so, my own research and publications have been in the area of maximizing the use of secondary and limited primary data collection. I know the researchers will come later and talk about the use of the need for data in this and that and the other, and that's important. In fact, I believe government should be spending money to support relevant research for our society. But my own research has been in the area of maximizing limited data. What are the data I'm speaking about? Well, population data, employment data from the Central Statistical Office. There are other types of information, data that we can supply to deal with the effects of neighborhoods and communities, the problems of neighborhood accessibility. I will talk about that a little more just now. Community disruption. And what are the data should we use for that? What data sets should we use for that? Well, surrogates of the effects that we are trying to measure that come also from CSO. Yes, there will be need, in my view, for data collection. But in a time of economic constraint, we should try to maximize what we have and collect what we need in a dispassionate and in a parsimonious manner. Sometimes we may find that the zonal system, that is for the traffic zones and so forth, using for the land use models, may be too aggregated. We may have to disaggregate them. We may have to subdivide the lands, the zoning system to be able to get a higher level of detail. I can't talk about that right now. I'm just throwing it out there. We can look at that. But we need to look at some non-transportation factors, such as regional growth rates. Everything is national. Even the data collection by the CSO is on a national basis. But we can look at the quality of our schools, the crime, which we know is a big issue, etc., as part of the non-transportation factors to be included. But because of my time, I'll just jump into two subsections. all our decision making to date has been in the sphere of mobility. What is mobility? Mobility is really the ease with which movement can occur. Speed, for example. I remember when the rapid rail was being looked at, I noticed it's back on the, I don't know, the front table, but it's being discussed again. The main factor was speed. You can get to here to there in this amount of time. Mobility. Every new highway we expand is mobility. Mobility can also come in the form of vehicle kilometers of travel, the amount of travel. So the higher the amount of travel, the higher the speeds, that satisfies congestion alleviation, satisfies the decision makers' objectives. But there's another term called accessibility. And it is really an understanding of the connectivity between spatial areas, geographically dispersed areas. How easy it is to get between the origin and destination, where you're going. While they're related, we have not given any emphasis on our decision making for accessibility. We build housing communities, and the first business that's set up there is the PH business, apart from the candles and the eggs and so on, sale of that. PH is the first business. Why? The people still have the school to go to outside of the housing, they still have the work and so on to go to. And lastly, of course I could respond to a whole set of things here, but because of my time, I'd just like to look at some of the land use design. While it was not specifically stated, was specifically stated about land use planning and socioeconomic, but I just want to look at some of the land use design principles that should be part of the impact situation on transportation. There should be an increase in opportunities for social interaction. A good way of doing that is actually transit, public transport. As part of the improvement in the quality of life. There should be access for all members of the community, regardless of their economic situation or mobility needs. Safety, freedom of risk or danger. We have public transport terminals that are drug dens in the night, existing right now. Security, perceived danger of being accosted, harassed, and robbed. I have asked people who are waiting on transport, well, hoping for transport, at PH locations. One woman told me, what, 9 o'clock in the night, what else can I do? Who do I call for my transport needs? We should be minimizing conflicts and confusion between vehicles, cyclists, pedestrians. Yes, pedestrians and cyclists. We are all pedestrians in some part of the journey. We walk to the car, we walk from the car. Right? Provision of parking, provision of only enough parking. Too much parking is a problem. We don't seem to think that is a problem here. But we need to have smaller dispersed parking. Again, I don't have the time, we could dwell on it. Minimize the number of lanes. I'm being a little radical here now. Minimize instead of maximize. I'm talking about in urban centers. Minimize, reduce the lane width. Why? Because it reduces the speed. Oh, a next strange point. Why would you want to reduce the speed? Because the technical people will tell you here there's a curve. That you can reduce the speed and still get higher capacities. That's a graph. We all learned it in traffic engineering. But what it does, it provides for all the modes of travel. In other words, it's called road sharing. Notice I said urban centers. Urban centers, you need to provide harmony for the users of the road space, walking, cycling, etc. The cars, yes, of course. That's why you have the dispersed parking. Everybody doesn't congregate to one area. And last, I'll stop, not last, but I'll stop I would like to advocate subsidized transit fares to make the cost of transit use more competitive with the automobile. We have to, I like that. We have to be able to give priority, which we have never had, for the administration of public transport. We have never had public transport management in this country, never, even to today. The PTSC is a government-owned bus company. That's it.
1 minute wrap up, Ray.
Things like passenger information systems. So I know I deviated slightly from the land use. And lastly, we need to encourage a cluster of compatible and complementary land uses, office, retail, and so on. In other words, mixed use, so that you minimize the need to drive. Our future is tied to be able to minimize personal car ownership policy, which we have adopted for the last, 40 or more years. Thank you very much.